Welcome to episode 2 of Coffee with me, Dave, and Coffee with Craig. Essentially, this is almost what we're calling TriTenacious TV. It's our new, as we said last week, kind of TV show. Nothing else like it in the world. Strength and conditioning for triathlon. A little bit of entertainment, a little bit of banter. Yeah. Unless you think we're weird, where maybe you won't find it that entertaining. But nevertheless, we just wanted to touch base. First of all, to say thank you for all the comments last week in terms of feedback. Cracking to hear that off people, and thank you for watching, all 5 of you. No, I think it was a bit better than that. But
it was slightly better.
Yeah, and good to see people subscribing. Again, just well, obviously it's great value in terms of the content that we deliver, so it's helpful. But again, it gives us that little bit of motivation to keep pushing on and actually feel like this is actually worthwhile doing.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and your comments make that worthwhile.
Totally. We nearly forgot coffee, which would be slightly ironic considering the title of this. But one thing we did want to say last week, it was a little bit longer than what we thought it would be, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, we just enjoyed it, didn't we?
Well, we said it's a bit like if you go down the pub and have a few pints with your mates. Sometimes you can end up just chatting away for 2 hours, probably about complete nonsense, but it can feel like you've only been there 20 minutes. But anyway, so we're going to get stuck into it today. So first of all, what's one of the areas we're covering today?
So the first bit we're going to talk about is how your strength work isn't dictated by the length of the triathlon that you might be competing in.
Yeah, so maybe sprint distance versus Ironman distance. We're going to have our usual feature of technique of the week, so you can just pick up on a couple of the classic errors that we see in triathletes with their strength training to make sure that you don't do them as well.
And then we've got a special feature on how, as a triathlete, you might go about planning your strength work within the context of your year.
Yeah, a bit of a classic error that we sometimes see being made, particularly now at this moment in time.
Definitely.
In the bin or in the gym, we'll be in here as usual, and of course, training tune of the week. So over the next 15-20 minutes, should be 15 or 20 minutes, whether you're in the car, whether you're on the train, whether you're at home, pretending to ignore the kids, whatever it is, or on the turbo, sweating it out, some really good value and definitely worth listening to. So we've recently spoke about how in science, so this isn't just me and Craig saying this, it's actually a guy called Per Agard, one of the most well-respected sports scientists, physiologists in endurance training in the whole world. He did a review of all the strength training studies that had been done and looked at how they improve performance. And his conclusion was that it's effective at enhancing your endurance performance, not just for short distance events, sprint triathlon, but also long duration endurance events. So for example, like an Ironman, one of the reasons why TriTenacious and the S&C providing that we do here, and S&C we provide online as well, we have sprint triathletes and we have those who do long distance Ironman, but we wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that, not only to kind of say, look, this isn't like, is it or isn't it? This is scientific facts, to the point where you are bonkers if you're not doing strength training. I think I've only put the other day, if you found out you could do a Zwift session that would give you a 7% increase in your endurance, you'd be smashing that Zwift, wouldn't you? But strength training seems to be viewed a little bit differently, but we can kind of understand why. So I know you mentioned one point that you wanted to touch upon.
Yeah, so
it was a question, I think, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It was on the view of how much time do you need to dedicate to your strength training depending on the event that you're doing, so for an Ironman, and it really emphasised that there's definitely a perception with regards to strength, like your triathlons, that the further you go in terms of distance, the more time you've got to dedicate to it, and that simply isn't the case, which actually plays really well in terms of triathletes because we know time's an issue, but actually with your strength, the time you dedicate is exactly the same from a sprint triathlon right through to an Ironman.
That is awesome, isn't it? Because if you think, if someone said to you with your say bike training, that to build up to an Ironman, you don't actually need to do more miles to get the benefits. You'd be like, well, that's great because instantly time isn't a problem. And I think that's one of the, why when we were just talking about the coffee machine, that was such a good point, because when time is a challenge for so many of us, not just we getting the training in, but the other demands that we have in life, going down the pub, but other demands that we have, if you know that this training doesn't need to increase in the amount you do it, that's a huge win.
It's a huge weight of your shoulders as well, that you've not going to find those additional minutes, hours to dedicate towards that. That's a fixed time. that you can get done.
And one of the reasons we speak about that is because the thing that you're manipulating in the session is essentially usually the intensity that you're doing work, or the volume, but the volume is like a rep takes an extra second. So when we increase volume, it's so relatively small.
It's very discreet, but it's still going to enhance performance.
110 minutes, it's not going to add time onto your training session. So the second part of coming off a question that we were asked, I'd love to say who it was by, my apologies, I just cannot remember your name. Lovely guy anyway, I think from somewhere in mainland Europe. The question were actually related to a little bit, how long then do I need to be spending doing strength training? And he said for Ironman, as we just said though, it really doesn't matter based on the event. We say based on not just the science, because sometimes the problem with science is it takes unrealistic situations. So we're always looking at it from our perspective as well, where we're actually working with people like you who aren't in a scientific study. You are in life with family, with wife and kids and husband and career. What can we get away with? We know that approximately about 60 minutes of quality focused strength training work, typically divided up probably into a couple of sessions. We have some triathletes who actually divide that time up into maybe 3 sessions. Again, it's very flexible how you want to approach this, and that's when we work with triathletes, where we don't say it's just got to be done this way. They can take the structure and mix it round a bit. But round about 60 minutes is where it's at. Now, when you actually kind of conclude the fact as well that some of that work can be done as a part of extended warm-ups, particularly, probably for your bike and running in particular. Actually, again, you're bringing back a little bit more time again, and the fact within your training program, again, swim, bike and run, there are probably some sessions where the volume's high enough and the progression can maybe come from intensity. Again, we're pouring a little bit. So this really doesn't become a time factor. I've really never met any triathlete where time is really the genuine factor. The only time it has been is when probably, totally understandably, their belief of what they need to do for strength training, smashing out 3 sessions a week, each one takes an hour, it's unrealistic, isn't it?
It's completely.
So that kind of first key point that we wanted to cover, we really wanted to express because it shows the practicality of strength training, it shows that it actually works, the things that you guys are actually training towards, not just our view, the best scientific evidence that you can actually get.
And that's another really key point that I think we talked about on the webinar yesterday, is that, as Dave said, you've got people that sit behind a desk, collate all the research, look into it, and the summaries of them are superb. But the beauty of it is that we're essentially taking that information and delivering it to you guys, so you don't have to sit there and try and understand it as well. But we can do it both being in situations that you find yourselves as well from a practical perspective, and that's key, because sometimes it's not practical, is it, when you read it? And that's really, really important. So I think that's a huge benefit you get as well.
And also, I've just finished my coffee. It was a bit cold, that one, but that last sip of caffeine also gave me another thought off. That is, just like I'm not a researcher, researchers aren't coaches who live and breathe this each day. So consequently, even the training studies that are conducted in science really aren't the best. I'm not saying they're bad or anything, but you wouldn't expect them to be the best because it's not their occupation. So again, this 60 minutes approximately or less is based on the quality of what you do. It's not a case of, 60 minutes, I can just smash out some leg extensions and curls and do 3 sets of 10. It doesn't work like that. It's totally dependent on the quality of what you actually do and also how you do it. So that's driven by what exercises you're doing, how you're progressing the exercises, the technical execution, why we do technique of the week, why we do coaching masterminds with our triathletes, why we coach anyway. So it is time efficient, but the quality of how you spend that time is the difference between will it work or won't it work. And that's why you can just get triathletes who will, just smash out work and get sore each week. Won't really help them, it'll probably just fatigue them. Yep. Or they can do legs, bums and tums and a little bit of pointless training, and it might feel okay, but again, it's not really giving them anything to hang their hat on. So
you want to be rest assured that every time you step foot in the gym, the exercise that you are doing are covering exactly the qualities that you require for your sport. Yeah. And that's peace of mind.
So this week we felt like getting off-site for a little bit and doing a feature which isn't in the training facility, or as it's become known, the Shrine, and actually get out on the road and do a little feature on a topic which is really relevant to you, not only because you're a triathlete, but this is a real error we see a lot of triathletes make, which combines both strength training and their endurance training, and is most likely to come into fruition and take effect now. So see what you think. On days like today with the sun out, as triathletes, it makes us think about wanting to get out on the road on our bikes, put on our running shoes, and naturally with events coming up, we start to increase the distances that we're doing. But one area that can really make us come unstuck, particularly with things like injuries, is when it comes to maybe in the winter you've done some strength work, but when the miles suddenly creep in because we're back out on the road, the strength work can stop. Now the problem with that is as we go out on the road, the forces and the loads that are going through our joints start to increase, so there's more demand on our body. But if we're stopping doing our strength work, what then happens is, because greater strength equals greater stability in your joints, all of a sudden those joints are less stable and those muscles are less well protected against things like strains. So you've got less strength and less protection, but you've got increased demand going through your muscles and the joints, which is why most injuries will occur during these higher volume training periods and during competitive periods. So how can you actually go about avoiding this? Well, it's really straightforward. You need to think about your strength work as a triathlete like you do with your swim, bike and run. You think of it annually. You think about how over the course of your 12 months, how over that period your training adapts and changes. None of them ever stop, they just adapt. And your strength work's the same. But it's easy to think, well, I've got to do 3 strength training sessions a week during the off season, which is again unrealistic for most. And then when all of a sudden we have days like this, it's impossible to sustain that, so you think you can't do it anymore. So it's much more important to think about it on an annual basis. Having a couple of strength training sessions per week that total no more than 60-70 minutes of work totally over a week, we know is viable for so many. And what it means then is when these busier periods come up with your mileage increasing, it's a sustainable amount that you can continue. Or like we say in our triathletes who we support, you can chop up those sessions into smaller bite-sized sessions to use as warm-ups and things like that. So again, your strength doesn't start to reduce during the periods when your body needs it the most. Not only to perform, because this isn't just about staying injury-free, that's one huge benefit, but it's using strength and conditioning as well to give you those performance benefits in speed, endurance, efficiency, and power as well. So today's technique of the week is going to cover something that happens a lot with single leg exercises. Now we're going to use a lunge as an example of this, but it doesn't just happen on a lunge, but typically with single leg strength exercises, particularly with triathletes or people who just aren't used to doing strength training. So what we're going to do is get Craig to demonstrate a movement, and I want to see if you can pick anything up when he does it. So Craig, if you go into the movement and do it how we don't want it. Okay, so he's gone into a reverse lunge. If you do it again, it was a bit shaky because technically it wasn't good. And it's this first point here where it goes wrong. So he's going to do it once more. You'll see when he lowers, it's 1, 2, and then he drops down. So instead of being one motion, what it becomes is a broken up motion. Now what can also happen, it's a little less subtle, is instead of going 1, 2, 3, it might just go 1, 2. So if you want to take one of those out, so one step, and then there we go. So if you can see on that, what he did, he's kind of took a step, stopped, and then lowered down. Now in all of these examples, what tends to happen, if you do a couple more bad ones, in all these examples, what tends to happen is it's likely, because you're stopping and pausing, we're going to reduce the actual overload and the mechanical work that are going through some of the target muscles at really important stages. Now what we're actually trying to do, so Craig, if you can do a good one now, we're trying to create one movement. So if we watch again, one steady movement, step, and lower. Now what he's actually doing there is as he steps back, he's starting to lower. So we've got constant mechanical tension, one of the key things going through the target muscles throughout the actual motion. If we're stopping and starting, what will tend to happen is that some of the most important points, some of the weaker points of the exercise, you're using your rear leg too much to support yourself, and you're going to lose that overload through the muscle. So whether it is a lunge exercise or any other type of exercise, do a good one again. Aim to make it one smooth movement. Look at that one to finish on, as opposed to a stuttered or broken up movement.
So Dave, here we are again for another episode of In the Bin or In the Gym. Right, are you ready?
I am ready.
Low cadence interval training for triathletes.
Love it. In the gym. Good science came out recently about how particularly really well trained cyclists, it could potentially be better than just doing normal interval training with a normal gear. That's not to say it's the only type of interval training you should do, but it definitely serves its place and serves its purpose. I think particularly as well for the psychological side of getting used to grinding out under fatigue. I think its benefits are not just physiological, I think the psychological impact in terms of tolerating fatigue when you're having just to screw out those pedals. Bang on.
Netflix documentary, In the Bin or in the Gym on Last Chance U.
Phenomenal. In the gym, times a million. The most recent one in particular, the basketball one, if you haven't watched it on Netflix, I feel more complete in my life having watched that last week. Coach Mosley, what a man. Coach Mosley, if you watch him, there we go.
In the Bin or in the Gym, George Clooney.
Clooney, well, what a man, really. I mean, I remember he was on, was it Nespresso ads? Clearly a man who likes his coffee. Nespresso, good little capsule. You know, he'd stroll around his little kind of glass espresso cup. Seemed to know what he was doing. Pretty cool, that. Clooney's in the gym.
So talking about famous people, but more sporting related, in the gym or in the bin with Roger Bannister.
Rog, not the, no,
Big
Rog.
Rog.
I don't just say Big Rog. In the gym, but everything's in the gym at the moment. In the gym, just because it's rumoured he was the first ever athlete to really use interval training. I think in between his studying, someone's probably going to correct me. Any person who was one of the first people to do interval training for me is a legend and a pioneer in what they do. Big respect to the man. Well done, Rog.
In the bin or in the gym on Pizza Hut.
I'm going to say in the bin. If you would have told me 15 years ago in the bin or in the gym, I would have said in the gym. But I think they've lost their edge. Too stodgy. I've seen them healthier now. But I think there's better pizzas out there.
In the bin or in the gym on Nordic hamstring curls.
I'm going to put the Nordics in the gym because they work. There's no question. You can look over 20 years of science. They reduce hamstring injuries. Are they the best way to do hamstring injury prevention? Maybe, maybe not. Big caveat with that is, for God's sake, if you haven't got a history of strength training, do not start to do Nordic hamstring curls. You won't be able to move probably for the best part of the week because the DOMs will be phenomenal. Or you'll probably face plant into the floor because you're not used to doing that type of exercise.
In the bin or in the gym on kettlebells in strength training for triathletes.
Oh, I almost feel like I want to say in the bin because I've said so much in the gym, but I'm going to have to be honest, I'm going to have to put them in the gym, but with a big caveat, like a kettlebell is just a waste. Your body doesn't know if you're holding a kettlebell, big bag of bricks, or loads of textbooks. It's just a weight. But there's this kind of belief, I think, that the kettlebells have this like mythical power. Suddenly using them does, which it just doesn't. But they, just like a dumbbell, very practical way to hold weights, probably when you're not at the stage of having a barbell or that type of weight, or maybe if you haven't got space at home or stuff like that. So in the gym, but like here, we have about 8 kettlebells and that's it, because the rest of the work is done using the proper stuff.
I don't know the answer to this. In the bin or in the gym on status quo.
Gym, just gym all day. In fact, I've had the quo blaring out of these speakers on many occasions, many a watt bike session, and anybody who says they only play like 4 or 5 chords, pick up a guitar like
definitely
me.
heard that.
Yeah, and try and play the quo. It is not. Give the guys some respect. Yeah, if you haven't got a bit of quo in your life, then there must be one quo song that you like. There's got to be one. And if you don't like one, I'd question you as a human being.
That's strong. So, in the bin or in the gym on Peloton treadmills?
Well, I feel compelled to almost just talk about Peloton as a whole.
Okay, do that then.
I don't get motivated by somebody 2,000 miles away telling me to come on and, you know, you've got this, Dave. You're stronger than you think you are. So for me, the concept of Peloton doesn't tap into what I think true motivation is. True motivation is about having that self-determining, more intrinsic type of drive. And while I can see for some people who aren't used to physical training, that can work for them. Fine, if you want to be in your utility room on your treadmill and, you know, Chloe in Australia is telling you to come on and that works for you, fantastic, brilliant. But for me, and maybe in general, for triathletes in general, where the type of mentality that people need for endurance sports, I think those positive words have got to come from within, not from Chloe in Australia.
In the bin or in the gym on stability balls?
Stability balls are going to go in the bin. Now, I've probably just opened up a pot of wasps to go everywhere, because if you bring out this topic in strength and conditioning, physiotherapy, this is where people can get really upset, and a few physiotherapists or S&C coaches might have just thrown their Bosu balls at the screen in pure disgust. But as with any training tool, it's not to say that they can't maybe have a place. But if I as a coach just turn around and said, well, it depends. Like, you could have just told me about this in the bin or in the gym. I could say, well, it depends. Dave, status quo, well, it depends. Like, you get nothing from me just depending. So yeah, in some circumstances, maybe they're viable, maybe the very early stages of rehab. But the reality is that for the demands of what our feet go through when we run, the forces which we encounter, the speed at which you encounter them are beyond what a Bosu ball will challenge us with. Yeah, they'll challenge us in very unstable positions, but that won't be using forces or speeds of forces and contractions within our muscle that actually occur when we actually do running. So there's better things to be doing.
And last but not least, in the bin or in the gym with Coors Light.
Coors Light. Now, you like a Coors Light?
I do enjoy the Coors Light.
Yeah, so that's the point. I'm going to put it in the gym or in my fridge. I think pretty good for a light beer.
Yeah.
I like the bottle. Does it still go blue on the main?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
What a touch of
And Van
genius.
Damme, you can't.
You
can't put it in the bin if it's got Van Damme.
No, I agree with that. And it's the better end of the calorie scale as well. Refreshing, crisp.
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna put it in the gym.
Definitely. Well, that concludes another episode of In the Bin or in the Gym, and we should look forward to next week.
And that concludes our broadcast for this week. We've covered some genuinely great stuff that can be put into action.
And some terrific banter.
Subject to the type of person you are. Would love to see comments, would love to see you share and like this, subscribe, whatever it is, because that does give us the motivation to actually continue to do this as we go through. And again, we'll happily answer any questions. Again, as always, if you want to learn more about what we do and how we support triathletes across this wonderful world, from the UK to Australia to Canada, wherever it is, go to TriTenacious.com. Otherwise, I'll say it's goodbye from Craig.
And it's goodbye from Dave.